Okay, so hopefully you got a chance to practice with the tree model. You got to do your topic sentence, your reasons. Maybe you did some elaboration on some of the leaves on those big branches. But again, one of the powerful things about tree is I can be in the STAR test and I can draw a little scrap paper model of that tree, and it gives me a very concrete way of structuring and doing some pre-planning of my writing. So again, powerful strategy, a lot of research behind it. Another strategy is the story grammar model, also heavily researched. Um, same author, same researchers. 5 steps. Think of a story you'd like to share with others. Let your mind be free. Write down the story reminder, and that's on the next slide. Make notes of your ideas for each part. Write your story. Use good parts, add, elaborate, or revise as you write or afterward, and make sense. Okay? And I do think that sometimes, just as kids forget that what they read is supposed to make sense, sometimes they forget that what they write is supposed to make sense. So here's the story grammar model. Write down the story reminders. 3 W's, 2 what's, 2 how's. Okay? 3 W's, 2 what's, 2 how's. Again, this is a really good strategy for narrative text. And again, kids can learn to memorize that. 3 W's, 2 what's, 2 how's. It's an easily memorized strategy. So what are the W's? Who is the main character? Who else is in the story? So who am I going to be writing about? Who are the people involved or the characters? When does the story take place? What's the time period? Where does the story take place? So again, those elements of setting. So who, when, where are the 3 W's. Do those first. Laying out, give the structure so people understand the context of the story and where it's taking place. Then 2 what's. What does the main character want to do? What do the other characters want to do? And what happens when the characters try to do that? So, what do the characters want to do? What happens when we do that? And if you think about it, many times in narrative text, characters want to do something. What happens generates some sort of problem, right? Because that tends to be the way, particularly in Western literature, that things work. And then we do the how. How does the story end? How does the problem resolve itself? How does the character feel? How do the other characters feel? Again, a very concrete structure for organizing a narrative. Will kids necessarily pick this up and write perfect narratives? No. Does it give them a way of at least organizing a very concrete structure for their stories? Yes, it does. Okay? Another thing I want to share with you is the sentence expansion strategy. And this is something you can use when children have, or you notice that children are not elaborating or not providing enough detail. We talked about kids who are struggling writers often write very short sentences. And so this is a way of kind of getting them to expand. And it can be something that you practice with and you can practice on a group. And I have actually used this strategy a lot with kids. Works very well. So you can teach subjects and predicates. You can combine those for complex. You can tell I've been recording a long time today, can't you? Combine those to produce a complete thought and then expand on those simple ideas. So teach kids to use who, what, where, when, why, and how, and to be able to combine all of those concepts into a sentence. So we could practice. So for example, I could give you the idea we bought. And then if it were all of us in a group, I could think, well, who bought? Well, Dr. Robertson bought. What did she buy? Ingredients for lasagna. Where? At HEB. When? Yesterday. Why? So she could make dinner. How? With her Discover card, right? And I could combine all of those parts into a sentence. Now, often when I've used this strategy with children, maybe I start off, we take a who and a what, and we just add where, and then we add when. And sometimes we can play with the order of these because, this may not necessarily be the order in which I want to include all these sentence elements, or maybe I'm not going to include them all in one sentence. But again, it's that way of, and it can actually be kind of fun. Kids like to go around and build onto those sentences. And again, it's a way of getting them to expand their sentences, expand and write something that's more interesting and more complex. Okay. Other strategies that I'm not going to go through with you, but that are certainly some that you can use. Again, the please strategy, which is for writing paragraph, plans, which is for goal strategy. There's a peer revising strategy. There's a CDO strategy. There's summarizing written text. There's a strategy from this called COPS. Capitalization, organization, punctuation, and spelling for proofreading. So lots of these strategies. For more information, I really do, like I said, Graham and Harris are the gurus. They've got lots and lots of good ideas. I've referenced a text, writing better effective strategies for teaching students with learning disabilities. That very well might be something that you'd want to look at. Okay? Spend a little bit of time, wrap up, and talk just a few minutes about teaching spelling. And some of you have probably heard me say that I think the thing we do the poorest job of in school, or where traditional instruction I think fails a lot of children, is in spelling. And part of it is because of the way we structure spelling instruction. So, if I asked you now, and I probably have asked you this before, some of you probably say, I'm really good at spelling. I like spelling, I like the spelling bee. Although one of the students in our class told me the other day, I still remember the word I missed when I went out. I think it was freeze. But anyway, some of us are, tend to be stronger spellers than others. But unfortunately, the way we teach spelling is we often go in and we introduce a list at the beginning of the week, and we give the strong spellers and the weak spellers the same set of 20 words. And so when you think about that, that means the children who are really good at spelling may already know how to spell 15 or 18 of those words on that list on Monday. So the learning load for them in terms of spelling for the words for the week is 2 or 2 to 5. But my kids who are not very good spellers may only know 1 or 2 out of those 20 words. Maybe they don't know any. And so the learning load for them is 18 to 20 words. Why would we put the largest learning burden on the students who need the most support? And so I really like you to think about restructuring spelling instruction to make it more meaningful for children. And one of the things that we know is for kids with learning and behavior disorders, most of the time their problems in spelling, and actually also in handwriting, are related to phonological awareness problems. And that phonological deficit is not just associated with reading, but it's also associated with spelling and being able to get those spelling words down on paper. So again, remediation in terms of phonological awareness can be very, very important, but also remembering that kids are going to need very specific instruction in spelling and handwriting, and it needs to be, again, in that zone of proximal development. We need to know what skills do they have, what skills do they need, and we need to teach that in a very structured way. And whereas, general educator, 20 students in the room, 22 students, they may not be able to individualize that spelling instruction to a large extent, but you, as an inclusion specialist, as a special educator, can be able to think about how do we structure that spelling instruction so that it's more meaningful for these students? And how can we make some adaptations so that becomes powerful? One of the things we can do is we can analyze student spelling errors in the same way we analyze their reading errors. So we can go through and say, are there common difficulties? Are there certain vowel sounds? Are there certain consonant sounds or blends or digraphs or diphthongs that they're having difficulty with? And we can go in and work on addressing challenges in those areas. I talked about traditional spelling instruction. It really doesn't work. We can also teach phonetic rules for spelling. And they're not 100% foolproof, but they work a majority of the time. And as kids learn, again, to what we hope is that they learn the rules and then they learn the irregular, the words that don't follow those rules. Teaching in smaller units become critical. So please, again, not 20 words in a hunk. And teaching spelling patterns, so word families, if you will. Onset and rhyme, teach kids using onset and rhyme. My youngest son, who has learning disability in math and also in writing, had a terrible time with first grade spelling. They used something called Spalding spelling, 20 words a week, complex words, and words that weren't always related to one another. I never could quite figure out. There were some symbols that it was a multisensory approach, but many times I couldn't quite figure out how the words were chosen to be a collection of, or there weren't necessarily obvious patterns for children to be able to practice in those words. And we spent most of first grade We use shaving cream. We'd make the letters in clay. I mean, we tried all kinds of things. You know, I finally realized my son does best, what a surprise, bouncing a basketball in order to learn his spelling words. But the bottom line was, no matter what I did, he wasn't very effective, and I'm not sure he ever passed his spelling test. And I finally said to the teacher at one point, we're not going to keep doing this because this is just frustrating. It's really teaching him he's not good at spelling. This was a teacher I worked well with, but it's like, this is not working. And part of it was because he could not see the relationship between those words, and they weren't, the instruction was not organized into units and patterns that he could master easily. We have to give kids sufficient practice and feedback on spelling, and we have to have them do meaningful things with the words. They need to be words that kids would actually use. Many times, I think really good spelling instruction, we look at kids writing and we look at the words they're trying to write and we choose those, and those become their spelling words. And then we know that chances are very good that, you know, those words will be used again, and they'll have lots of opportunity to practice them. And spelling needs to be taught through direct instruction. I need to model, I need to use research-supported strategies, and I need to give kids opportunities to repeat and practice those words over and over using instructional language that's meaningful for them. And I also need to make sure that they maintain previously learned words. So I don't know if y'all remember your own spelling instruction, but you probably went through 6 or 8 units and then you had a review unit. Well, for kids who are really struggling, not reviewing a word for 6 or 8 weeks is probably going to be really difficult, and that may mean that I don't have that anymore. And then we need to think about how to motivate students to want to spell correctly, but also not to see their spelling errors as a disaster, but as an opportunity to learn. We include dictionary training in spelling instruction because, again, it can help me find words, and now most of our dictionaries are online. But again, remember, I have to be able to come pretty close to spelling something correctly before I'm going to be able to find it in the dictionary, including with an online dictionary. I am not going to go through every single one of these approaches as explained in your text, but lots of different strategic ways of helping kids to master spelling words. And again, most importantly, think about what kind of words are you choosing, how much opportunity are children going to be able to have to use that words, giving them that spelling instruction in small and meaningful chunks and helping them to recognize the patterns, okay? Research says about 3 words a day, okay? So at the most, maybe 15 words a week. Lots of opportunity for modeling, for using various modalities. I just talked about some of the ways you can do that. The computer is actually a really good tool for spelling instruction because we need things to be repetitious. We can do peer tutoring with kids in spelling. There are all kinds of study techniques you can use, but remember that it needs to be explicit, it needs to be systematic, and again, I can't reiterate enough, it needs to focus on the appropriate words within that child's zone of proximal development. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up by saying, let me close this down. The screen's going to look a little funny for a few minutes, but I'm going to try to go in. Whoops, and I'm getting ready. Excuse me. Hopefully I'll be able to cut that out. Okay, I'm going to go into Blackboard. I want to show you what you're going to do for Activity D. Sign in. And go to the right class. It'll take me a couple minutes. So here we are on the home page for our class. I want you to go into units. No, the unit on writing, you should have already been there, and hopefully you've done your reading for this unit. I would remind you, please make sure, whoops, well, now I realize that that's something that needs to be edited because that doesn't look so good, but I'll go back and do that in a second. But please make sure that you're reading these overviews I provide you. I really do that for a reason. It's not just that you go over and figure out what the assignment is, but you know, the dates for things, the objective for the unit, some guidelines are all included in that overview. But what I want you to look at now is activity D. Go ahead and open that. Let's go ahead and open that up. And it says you're going to choose one of 3 samples to analyze. And I'll go back and open that up for you in a minute. After analyzing the sample, I want you to identify at least 2 strengths the student has in writing and 2 areas you would focus on for improvement. And then describe 2 strategies you would recommend when working with this learner. And then you're going to post your response on the discussion forum, sample 1, sample 2, or sample 3. And then I want you to post 2 responses to your peers, one on the discussion board that contains your original post. So if you did sample 1, read what somebody else said about sample 1 and comment on that, and one on one of the other discussion boards, okay? So let's go back and look at what are these samples. There they are. They're going to go into your download. You can pull them up. It's going to take a minute because I don't have Word open. There we go. So there's sample 1. There's sample 2. There's sample 3. You'll go through, you'll read the sample, you'll choose one, and don't necessarily choose 2 because it's shortest. But go through, you know, look at the writing overall and think about what are some of the strengths, what are things that the student's indicating that they know about writing in the writing process, and what are some areas where you would begin your instruction if you had a student who had written one of these passages, okay? Then you can go over here to the discussion forum. And you can pull up sample 1, sample 2, sample 3. You can create a thread, right? Boom, create a thread, and add your response there. And then again, what you want to do is you want to, you know, choose a sample that you're going to comment on. Then in terms of your peer responses, make sure that you go back and respond to one of your peers who analyzed the same sample that you did, and respond to a peer who analyzed a different sample than you. Okay? Let's go back and look one more time. I also want to make sure that you have understood the way I'll evaluate this project. So if you go into Activity D, you can view the rubric. Please note that your analysis of the particular sample you chose is good for 8 points, and you will get points by reflecting a thorough understanding of the writing skills and substantive information to support your instructional planning. So I should be able to tell that you've carefully looked at that child's writing sample, that you know what their strengths are, and that you've identified your needs and their needs. And then when you come down to your strategic or your instructional strategies, I should be able to tell that you built off that understanding or that analysis that you did, okay? Then you're going to get 2 points for commenting on your peers' post. And again, more than just great idea or I really like what you said. And I think the posts that sometimes are the most meaningful, at least for me, when I get feedback from my peers, are not just telling me what I did well, but posing a question or helping me to think about things in a different way. And then another 2 points for your writing, okay? So I think that should wrap this up. I look forward to seeing your products and would welcome any questions you have